We can start. Dear ambassadors, first of all, let me thank you for your time and for this opportunity, because it's very important to talk on various issues and topics. And let's start with the investment climate in Georgia. Let's assess in a few words, and then we will try to go deep in this process. Which one of you wants to start? Maybe you, Your Excellency, and then we will develop.
I first of all, thanks for this invitation, and wine is very useful because there is the motto in vino veritas, so we will be
right.
truthful. I do think that Georgia has all the basic fundamentals in economy, so as a good business environment, reduced public debt, inflation is subdued. Frankly, poverty is still a main issue, but has been largely reduced looking at the last 2 decades. And a lot of important reforms are ongoing. What is important is to translate more and more this potential into practice. And for that, there is a mixture of more short, medium-term measures and more long-term measures, and both must be pursued with the same determination. I think that is important to identify, to exploit the leverage of the CFTA, for example.
Right.
And for that is important to identify some areas and some products on which to focus the efforts. And this can be done in a reasonable lapse of time. And it is important to develop all the measures in a long-term perspective that can be important for investors. Of course, the political stability,
of course.
The efficiency and reliability of the judiciary, of the judicial system, and the other reforms, providing the potential investors with a framework of reliability and safety, including the stability of institutions, democracy, which is not only an ethical, moral value, is also important for investors, and things like, for example, a capital market, the implemented pension reform, an insolvency law, for example. Here is very easy to open a business, is more difficult to wind up business.
It's very interesting to hear these topics from you, but what do you think, what's the most attractive when we talk about Georgian investment environment in Georgia? Your opinion is very important. What do you think that...
If I can complete and then I leave, I think the most, the most promising sector for me is tourism, for different reasons, because you have an extraordinary potential, and because is something that can be providing the right framework, financing for small and medium enterprises, incentives, training for the workforce, can be a widespread growth. It can be really inclusive because everyone can set up his own guest house and develop his own business.
Country is trying, you will agree with me, I think, that country is trying to develop this sector, and they see the potential, the governmental agencies. But the other topics and other directions that are attractive when we talk about investors, foreign direct investments, please.
From the Austrian point of view, we are there's a strong interest by Austrian companies to go to Georgia, but little output. So on the one hand, we see that there is a growing interest. This is because the Eastern European market has been quite exploited. So our companies are going further east. And in the Eastern Partnership, you have Georgia, which is considered to be a democratic country with rule of law, friendly people, and it's very easy, as you said, to open a business. But what I see from the last couple of years, and I've been here for the last 3 years, a strong interest by companies, but the output relatively low, and that is because of different reasons. On the one hand,
the most important and crucial reason, can you name one of them?
It's difficult to be diplomatic, but
it's always difficult.
I think that we struggle with the mentality of doing business. It's very hard for our companies that come here to close a deal, because there's certain expectation from the Georgian counterpart that we do much more of the job than we expect to do. What is very good in this country is that there is no or very little corruption, and that's why we have a strong interest, and those companies, the bigger companies that are here, they are doing a good job, they are very happy to be here. But Austria is a country of small and medium enterprise. We hardly have big companies like maybe Germany, and so they are just companies of 10 to 100 people. And in Georgia, you need someone, a Georgian, who is taking care of you, who knows where to go, who sees through the structures, who find ways.
You reached a good point, and it's this difference really matters, as I assume. But let's talk about the Turkey, our neighbor country. What's your opinion, and how would you assess our investment climate and environment?
Well, first, of course, I will support what was said by Antonio and Arad, but with the Turkey has, of course, a little distinguished place compared to both countries, because we have a land border.
Right.
And that land border, for the past 26 years, this geographic proximity, certain easy reach, made Turkey a little more advantageous than the others in trade. But in terms of investment, actually Turkish investors, Turkish SMEs share the same concerns pretty much with their other counterparts. I would say in trade and in investment, in economic relations, you can have sometimes high inflation, low inflation, whatever happens. It could be sometimes your labor market is more advantageous than the others. The most important part is, can you solve the problems? Do you have mechanisms, efficient mechanisms and understanding to solve the problems when they arise? And I call it a headache index. And of investments. I know that there's this famous Khachapura index, and there are a lot of indices that the real academic or the business people look into. For me, there's a headache index as the ambassador. Like, how many cases do I see pending more than 5 years, more than 2 years, 3 years? How many investors that come, or people who have been trading, how many of them come to me and say that, look, I've sold this, but I can't take my money, and I've done everything, but it's been 2 years, I'm like $750,000 short now because of the trade.
You mean a decision-making process from government, or you mean judiciary, or both?
It's everything together. It's basically, sometimes it's the business who are, in the first instance, they haven't really, I always ask them, why don't you take your money before you sell your things, right? But this is like, these examples are important, because if the people start problemless trade, it turns into investment. If they see, this is how investors come. First, they want to see the market, the opportunities. What is the re-export potential? What is the export potential? How the market grows? How are the retail working, the logistics working? And how does the tax work? The customs work? So trade is the opener for the investors. And for that respect, I must tell that there are Turkish investors, particularly in the past 5-6 years, who have, just like Arad told, there are many attempts to come and invest, to open, which at some stage does not bear fruits, which is a little disappointing for me, because as an investor you would want all that work put into that, all that travels to bear fruits with investors. Now, but we have also good examples. For a good investment to come, I wait until the end of the 2 year, until they make their investment, they start producing, they establish their whatever chain it is, that's the sales chain, export chain, the supply chains, everything, to see how it goes. And then the taxation.
Right.
And I wait until the first dispute. How does the dispute, the headache index. Georgia, compared to other emerging markets, has a lower headache index, which is good. Now, there are certain migraine attacks, I call them. Sometimes you don't expect to have that. But the best thing about with us and Georgia, Turkey and Georgia, we have the mechanisms, the dialogue mechanisms, and we have the understanding to solve those disputes. And usually without necessarily involving high-level or diplomatic requests. Usually it is solved in the arbitration or in the courts or something. Yes, there are certain cases which I don't myself understand how it turns out that, but it's a part of the general issue. Now, one thing I need to really underline here, because I always say that to everyone, the Turkish investors, despite certain economic difficulties in Turkey, are still investing abroad as they are investing in Turkey. When I see the market, there are certain countries which are in their shopping list. They go to the Balkans, traditional places. They go to the EU countries, which is promising them lower headache index. They're going to Ukraine, which has a population advantage, the market advantage, and the surroundings are also not too bad in terms of the market enlargement prospects. Then Uzbekistan. So there are new emerging markets which offer more or less the same things: political stability, in certain cases which may be less, their rule of law or acceptable levels of dispute management mechanism, economic policies, the international lenders' favorable positions. So my question is, what does Georgia offer in addition to top of that to attract the Turkish businessmen? I say, as a defender of Georgia, easy access, but I don't know if they would have the same thing.
Now we're sitting here and trying to talk about these challenges, because challenges are always important to be mentioned from you, from representatives of other countries, because these should be named, and then someone will hear, someone will take into account this issue. So my question will be like this. How would you assess, because of these challenges that you named and because of this decision-making processes that are prolonged for a couple of years, how would you assess the work of government? I will have this one question, and this is very important. How consistent and proper is the economic policy of our country and our government, I meant? Are there any suspensions as well as difficulties with the decision-making process from them when we talk about the economic policy?
Once again, in Vino Veritas, I will try to strike a balance between diplomacy and sincere friendship and the duty to be truthful and so trustworthy. I do think sincerely that the government is making a lot of effort in terms of reaching out, in terms of strengthening the narrative and highlighting the plus of the country in terms of business environment, and in general to carry out the reforms.
But still?
But I think that there is an extra mile which is not marginal to translate these very effective and well-working slides, PowerPoint presentations that are offered in many workshops, and they're very impressive. I mean, the rankings, you know, the practical and real outcomes of these efforts into the reality of Mr. X coming here, and considering that the business-friendly environment, the cheap labor, you know, these things are important, but they're not the real ones to make the difference. Because I mean, it's full of cheap labor countries.
That what is the main
I mean,
makes
bluntly
difference?
speaking, you must have, for example, let's talk about manufacturing. You have you make an investment when you have already an important market. So I don't know. Talking about a neighboring country, going to Turkey is a big size market. It's very well connected already, not in potential. And another factor can be raw materials. So if you don't have these, you have to catch up with other incentives. So provide real connectivity. Not saying we are a corridor, because still to go to Batumi takes 4 hours, 5 hours sometimes, no, by car.
Right.
Provide real infrastructure, and you are doing that as a country with great effort, with great commitment, and try to strategize and to focus on some sectors when you decide that you can make the difference.
Do we have proper decision makers in the country when we talk about the economic policy? Because it's very important. The things that you
to my colleagues.
When you mention these challenges, my question is, from my point of view, it's very obvious. Then there's a lack of decision makers in the country, because we have this environment, we have the potential, we have the will from foreign investors, and then what is?
May I be a bit of a demagogue here?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. Two things. It's you're asking about the top. I'll be asking about the grassroots level. The economy doesn't develop, trade doesn't develop only by the decision makers. This is not Gosplan 5 year, it's over. That planned economy is over. It's the dynamism, it's the entrepreneurship that gives the economy, the investment climate, the dynamism. It's the counterparts. Now, I met many very good entrepreneurs in Georgia. These people, like our friends, all of us, we know them. They made decisions, they took risks. They had nothing, now they have their businesses. They feed their family, they employ people. And if there were not good decision makers, these things wouldn't be able, even with the entrepreneurship. So there is decision making which is good enough to give that impetus and open up the ways. Whether on macros or other things, it's another decision. In every country there are ups and downs of decision making, and actually you have a self-criticizing government, by the way. Sometimes it's all, frankly speaking, very transparent. And of course it's your right as a citizen, as a journalist, to question your own government, but I do believe that it is sometimes not about the general decision making of that government. It's about whether we
should not start from the top, but we should start
culture of entrepreneurship, culture of investment, and that starts in little market. And don't underestimate little market. I always say, and it's one of my favorite places. It's also close to the Gez customs. These are the economy starts there.
I would like to ask your opinion as well, because what's our main problem? When we talk about this, you agree with their opinion, or you have like
I would
different?
Take a nuance in that. I agree that there is the need for entrepreneurship, which is there with the young people. I think there's a generational conflict within the Georgian society, which is somehow ripped apart between the wish to be part of the Western society and the old dinosaurs that sit in many places and make the development, the flourishment of the Georgian society very difficult. We struggle a lot with no decision making. For us, this is one of the biggest problems in making business here, and the lack of decision making, or the lack of telling the truth, what is your interest, is one of the main stumbling points for some of the bigger companies that would have wanted to take part. Also a big problem was the public tenders, because a lot of money is via soft loans, and here we struggle with, from our point of view, not always transparent ways of taking a decision what company wins a tender or not. Tenders. And this is something that is being also tackled, by the way, in a specific EU twinning program, which an Austrian is actually implementing. So I hope that maybe over time this will help. But in general, I think the big picture is that there's a generational different speed between the younger ones that want to be engaged, that want to have a different society, and the older ones that are, whether they want it or not, they're just imprisoned in the Soviet mentality or post-Soviet mentality, even if they mean good, even if they mean well for that. That's my view.
Just if I can briefly step in on the argument of tenders, we draw the attention of the government, the series of countries, on the big cake, let's say now, which is infrastructure, of course, because there is an ambitious plan. So the total amount is around $3.5 billion. It's very important to make it in the right time and in the right way. We highlight the importance of it's not only the question of transparency, it's the question of the criterion you're using in choosing, because you should choose a life cycle cost perspective rather than just the cheapest price. Because you know, when you build a bridge or a highway, you can spare money in two ways: to pay it cheaper now, and then pay more when you have to for maintenance or redoing the bridge, or you can have more sustainable infrastructure, lasting more,
but paying more in the beginning
when they're done.
So there is a lack of this attitude.
I think that
to this point.
I think that this is not a problem of these government. I think it's natural that when there are decision makers on the governmental side and also lenders on the financial institution side, every one of these two parties wants to showcase the fact that they're doing more with the same money. I mean, with $100, I did 100 kilometers of road rather than 80. But the point is that if you can do 80 kilometers and this road is safer and lasts more, probably the money has been better spent.
Absolutely.
So this is, and I add a last point, this is also very important to make this not just a firework that you are spending, because at the end of the day is taxpayer money, because this money, largely speaking, is lent by banks, but has to be returned. So you are spending your own money. And so I think this is a precious opportunity to transform this ambitious plan also in a driver to advance the technological competence or your local businesses. Because of course, when foreign companies are hired, they are hired because of their know-how, their experiences in making, I don't know, bridges, dams, or whatever, railways. The important thing is that if they partner with the local businesses, these local businesses must be put in the condition to, I don't say learn something, but I mean learn and be more equipped to do it alone in the future.
There should
But
be more
if you
ambitious.
just apply the same methods, this is just favoring a limited circle of
So you won't accelerate
stakeholders.
the increasement of
No, I mean that
quality,
one
maybe.
with such an ambitious project, this is a precious opportunity to both look at the long-term sustainability of these works, and at the same time as a driver for growth for your own businesses, partnering with the foreign companies.
Yes, but
Otherwise, it's just a business card.
I actually want to sort of a little challenge there, I see. We've been talking about this with a lot of friends. And Turkish contracting companies also join the Italian, they partner. Actually, the contractor companies have no nationalities. They cooperate together.
Among the best.
So they, exactly, among the best, with some companies among their technical needs and qualifications. So it's not about countries, or a group of countries for that matter, but sometimes the issue is the fund lenders, international lenders, are usually on boards. They are boards and they're payers of those boards. And then what happens is that they establish the qualification. It's not the government.
Yeah.
So the Georgian government has to listen to the demands of the funds, and these funds are international funds who are represented in Tbilisi, and they're of course they want the cheaper too. So we have issues there, all issues, but this is not about particularly with the government. This will have an impact on the infrastructure of Georgia. For instance, if you're able to do 2 lanes today, why should you be planning for 1 lane?
I think that all of us agree with that. Both private and public sector have this should be more responsible, and they have this responsibility to build the economic together. I mean, brick on this brick. So they both have this responsibility.
In general,
Yeah, exactly.
And their both role of
short
both
perspective,
directions is crucial. Before we move to the next topic, please enjoy the delicious cheese, the wine.
We already started silently.
I was silent, just nicking the
So, and let's move to the next topic, and this is energy sector. And I will tell you my opinion.
So we need energy.
Yeah, you need energy.
Calories?
And the country needs energy. You agree with me that country, Georgia, needs energy because the demand is increasing from year to year on the electricity, and we have these sources, right? We have these hydro sources. And many investors, thankfully and hopefully, many investors are coming to Georgia and building the hydropower plants. The small ones, the huge ones, and etc. For example, Nanskra Hydro, there is a small one, Khadori power plant, Mestia Chala, and etc. How would you assess? This will be very simple. First question will be very simple. How do you assess the role of energy sector in Georgia's economical development? And then I will move to your country's experience.
But I think that it is evident that Georgia so far hasn't found any oil or gas. Oil and gas are important for Georgia for the role of being a transit country, and this is not marginal. And this gives also a lot of strength in terms of geopolitical importance. So this is already an important role of energy, playing as a safe factor. Then there is the energy you can produce, and this being part of the
energy community, being able to enjoy in the future much more flexibility, the opportunities can grow. I personally, I believe more in middle-sized plants because, as everywhere in the world, the big plants have also many problems attached.
In problems, you mean?
I mean, if you have to.
Social problems?
Social problems.
And that's
like
all? Or there's.
A big dam, of course. You have to handle it in a very proper way to demonstrate to the population that they will have a dividend, because I think that from a certain point of view, I'm talking in general terms, they must see, because I mean, you can say whatever
I think that you had this opinion as well, yes?
You can say whatever you want, but a dam is a dam. I mean, it's
so
something that changes the
what?
landscape. And so, I mean, if this is done in the best, with the best technology to reduce the impact, the environmental impact, and you can demonstrate that this is a driver for local growth, and bringing concretely projects, social projects, employment, this, I mean, changes the picture. Otherwise, you are doomed to face a lot of problems.
In this topic, can I just have one question? Whose role is crucial? The role of company itself or the role of government to raise awareness?
Once again, is a joint venture. I mean, if there is an investor, a big investor, and the government, both, and also the financing institutions, they must be, of course, concerned of the social aspects, because you can plan something on paper according to a strict timetable that then is not possible to implement, because, I mean, reality is a strength.
Is it possible in Georgia to build a big hydropower plant? Because we have these examples. We have the companies that are coming here and that have just nowadays spent a lot of money, a lot of thousands, a lot of millions and billions to build these power plants. Then what we are telling these investors, on the one hand, we are inviting them to come to Georgia and invest in this sector, and on the other hand, we say that we face this, that they have constantly these obstacles from society, maybe from government. Then where is this golden middle in this issue? Because we agree, all of us, that our country needs electricity, right? Our country has to use its energy resources. Then how can we resolve this issue?
I think water is a natural resource, so I think politics need to be on board from our point of view, and they should follow, together with the company involved, a policy of social inclusion, meaning that you need at every stage, nowadays at least, to listen to the voice of the people, try to convince them and try to keep them on board. This is what we try to do in Austria. One second issue that I think is quite important, that works at least in my country well, is the regional factor. Georgia is a centralistic country, and one of the projects of support is decentralization. This is also because politicians on the level of local and regional level often know better and are closer to the people and can implement better projects than if they are being maneuvered centralized. And if the people have the impression that Tbilisi is ordering everything and they have the feeling that politicians are detached, things often do not work. It is often better to have the regional communities involved, empowered if possible, and one always finds some way of giving the population, the local population, the feeling that something comes out of them for that as well, like in the tourism sector or related industries.
So the government as well as companies have to spend many hours to sit and to explain to these people that
not just explain, to offer them concrete dividends.
You had this very interesting opinion, as I remember, about this beneficial deals. And about these benefits that local population should
Sometimes
have.
this is first. There is no like this golden formula which works everywhere.
Right.
Sometimes there are these hamlets where the people do not want the benefits. They even see those as bribes. They say, we are not going to sell the nature which we borrowed from our ancestors for nothing. So, without your citizens, no project will be able to succeed. That's why good planning, this whole negotiation period involving the citizens in a democratic way, but also explaining them the results of it. But sometimes it's political. I've seen certain arguments, I've heard certain arguments sometimes, not in Georgia. They say no, and there is no like, okay, they close all dialogue means. And then you listen, and you could see this political maneuvering behind it sometimes. So it needs responsibility on both sides. My idea is this. It's not my idea, it's actually, I'm not the expert here. And in the meantime, let me tell you that speaking on this issue, I feel a little awkward because your Minister of Economy is the real expert on this issue. So anything I say, I think Minister Turnoa will know much better. When I look at the hydroelectricity, it has, in Turkey, we have a project called the Southeastern Anatolian Project, GAP. That project was designed in a way that not only the hydroelectricity, but also irrigation, mostly irrigation. It's reshaping a whole of future of one region and actually transport of water relations and all that. So it's huge. I don't see that huge projects here in Georgia. Anguri was already done, and it was also one sort of a project like that.
But now Neskru Hydro is coming, for example, this upcoming project, and they are developing this project.
Namakhwani, which is the big investor of a Turkish company.
Right.
Namakhwani will be biggest, as far as I know. And it involves not one big dam, but it involves a cascade of a couple of dams. But the issue here is electricity, even if you produce it there, you won't sell it there. It connects to the grid. It connects to the system. There's an economy of electricity production. So the people who don't own the land, but they live off the land, with that environmental impact, there is first the macro planning, how much energy you need, electricity. What do you do with that? You can't put electricity in your pocket. It has to be sellable. And who buys that? Yes, Georgia needs energy, but most of the energy Georgia needs is the fluctuation, summer, winter differences.
Of course.
And it's also about distribution, the line, like how would you take it to the remote areas, the energy. Now, you cannot get your general grid to these wonderful places we visited together in Khevsureti, in the border area. They have to have a small hydroelectric, very small hydroelectric power on that river. So you have to have hydroelectric river there. There is no other way.
Now I have a question. If there is like this situation that we have right now, that we depend on the import of electricity, right, on one side, and we have these resources, then where is the logic to buy electricity and not to allow the investors to build, of course, with these benefits to the local population?
No, you have to. I mean, there is nobody. I don't think no one is saying don't build hydroelectric powers in Georgia.
But even when we talk about the small hydropower plants, we have these problems. They have these obstacles. They are challenging these, and they're facing these challenges. So where is the decision? What was your experience? Let's talk about the experience.
I think the impact when I talked about small middle size, the advantages are mainly that the impact is much smaller, and the return on investment is much quicker, and of course the capital you are mobilizing is smaller. So. You can have 1, 2 of these big plans, but then the important thing is to develop a network of these small, medium power plants that can attract the interest or even of foreign investors. Of course, you have to be very determined and very interested in doing that. You were asking about experiences. I had the experience of assisting an Italian investor, producer, who looked at other markets, apart from the Balkans and the usual suspects, which are closer to us, and did study the market in a very, I would say, stubborn and very detailed manner, to understand a lot of things. I mean, the stability of prices, the margins, the importance of having the PPA or not, the location, the conditions, the financial conditions. I tell you that it was not easy. He found, at the end of the day, 2 plants, one already operating, and he made an offer, and another one to be built as a greenfield investment. They're still ongoing in a negotiation. The partners changed their mind because, I mean, where we were talking about the concrete factors, frankly, is not to be anecdotal but I mean, I've seen these oftentimes. I mean, it's difficult to find a partner, a reliable one, a liquid one, having real money, not just committing to bring money and then asking for mortgages with the contracts, you know. This is the reality, and not changing his mind after having shaken hands, saying, okay, the deal is closed. So all these, not only how quickly you can open a business at the Justice House, which is wonderful, makes the interest for the market. So, summing up, I do think that there is an interest. Is not for everyone, is for specialists coming here and really selecting out of the, once again, potential theoretical maps, when you see a lot of dots of plans having obtained authorizations and being theoretically on the market, but then asking for reasonable prices or having other problems, you have to stay here and look for the real opportunities, and they are not so many.
So for us,
what about Austria's experience? Was the country struggling with these problems that we named when we talk about the energy sector?
Actually, in the energy sector, we feel pretty happy. 1/3 of our direct investment is in this field. And we have been active on the one hand by building hydropower stations, on the other hand by delivering the turbines for that, Andritz, which is a world market leader for that. There is one hydropower station that we have built. There are two tracks, for two buildings, if you want, Aragvi. So when you go up to Gudauri, on the left side you have the Aragvi trench. And if you go down, you see, and you can visit, and we have many tourists actually going there to see at this Aragvi hydropower station power plant. And you can go from Aragvi 1 to Aragvi 2, which is 4 kilometers distance, which is going through beautiful pastures. Unfortunately, at the present, they have some motorcyclists going there as fun, which from our point of view, that's tourism too, but that's not the kind of tourism that we would allow. But so in this field, we are doing good business actually.
We ride motorcycles. I think we don't agree with it.
Why not? When you mentioned tourism, And yes, and let's move to this very interesting topic. It was really interesting for me that energy tourism as a new niche of industrial tourism. This using, for instance, this renewable energy as a tool to achieve tourism sustainability in the country. What is your opinion about this?
So we have big hydropower stations that today it would be almost impossible to build them in the middle of the mountains. And in the last decades they have built like very nice mountain streets going up there, very nice resorts where you can go, where you can travel above the tree line. So this is how you use that. You can also swim or take a canoe in that. We have in other fields, for instance, there is a village or a city actually in eastern Austria which is getting its energy from biogas. And so people like Mr. Schwarzenegger, who likes the climate issue, he comes there regularly with a bunch of tourists, of journalists, and of course where Schwarzenegger goes, you have also many tourists coming. Normal tourists, but also industrial tourists, that try to find ways how can you increase your renewable resources. And biogas, for instance, is one of these possibilities. But so environmental tourism which goes to hydropower stations or to different sources of energy is very successful. In 1978, this is the last point, the Austrian population voted in a referendum against a nuclear power plant. And since that we just import indirectly sometimes, because even we have to import in winter, for instance, energy. And this is also a magnet for tourists. This nuclear power station that has never entered into force. And here, if I look in Georgia with so many Soviet relics that look, of course, not nice, but what can exploit this situation and make out of that tourism? Georgia is, from my point of view, a tourism world, one of the world leaders, at least from the potential.
So we have this potential, and can we gain this foreign experience when we were talking about this energy tourism, to call it like this? Please.
First, until you reach the energy tourism, I would say you have a lot of fields that there is a lot of potential. Energy tourism is a niche market. Now, the potential in Georgia for tourism is so big and so rich, and hydroelectric powers are not going to spoil it, by the way. So I see sometimes discussions done properly, managed properly, controlled properly, everything will be okay. My friends right now, I'm receiving messages, when are you free? When can we come? Georgia is already making its name in the market, which is very good, because I do also believe that the Turkish Eastern Mediterranean, Eastern Black Sea, Eastern Turkey can also benefit from this trend and also give Georgia an option to work together. So until energy tourism or what you call infrastructure tourism, I think there are things to do here, which your tourism administration, Ministry of Economy knows. They have started a plan, and I hope we're all going to support this, because our investors work in this. Our investors, I don't know what percentage to be sure, but we have Turkish people who have invested here, built hotels, and they built in geothermal, they invested in small family hotels, 5-star hotels. And the tourism sector is a clean sector if properly managed, and it has extra benefits for PR, political recognition, many directions. And Georgia has every potential for that. And it is using its potential already. But I think there is still to be done. Again, I know many young Turkish people who want to go to Svaneti. You see, we never heard about Svaneti 20 years ago. Now they hear, they want to come, but they can't stay anywhere.
So this is the problem, that environment is is not as good as it should be?
Let me say a couple of things. The first is very frank, as our discussion is. When there is a potential, there is a risk. I mean, selfishly speaking, but this is really selfish, one could think, it's better to keep Spanetti like this, because I mean, I know I can go. I mean, there is this, or even these remote valleys. I mean, there is the taste of, you know, being kind of an explorer. But then you are trapped in a certain layer of tourism that is not harmful, but it's not enough, which is the backpackers, the adventure tourism, you know? You have to make a jump and enlarge your audience, but the point, the crucial point is how to enlarge the audience without spoiling it, without spoiling the place, because I mean, you can at the same time keep on making big volumes, but you will have spoiled the place. So you will have quantities, not quality, and that also means capacity spending, and this is also linked to the infrastructure plan. What I mean is that once you have halved the time necessary to go to Svaneti, and you don't have a proper master plan to keep Pushkuli or Mestia as they are, there is a big risk of spoiling, and once you've spoiled, you're spoiled. And let me say just, there are some opportunities. Italy, in this sense, is a very useful experience. You are doing an effort in terms of building cultural roots with the Council of Europe, having social guest houses, you know, cooperatives, farms providing hospitality. All these things are very successful and offer a different way, a clean way, and but if you go to some exceptional, we are talking about Spanetti, but if you go to Russia, there are very few hotels available.
I agree with you. And
either
we need
guest houses or some.
only some of the cities are developed and use their real potential. But I will have last question to you, and we don't have this resource to record it anymore because of this only. And last question will be like this: where is Georgia going? This question is relevant, or everything is clear for you? Just brief answers, please. Where is Georgia going? Just this question. Or it's clear?
Georgia is going to Europe, and it is Europe. Georgia is developing. First, actually, maybe I will rephrase. Georgia is not going anywhere. Georgia is where it is, and it is a very good place. It's a real good real estate that you have. And we are very happy to have Georgia as our neighbors. Georgia is developing. It will develop. It will have better distribution of income. It will have maybe better services sector. Your next generations will be able to say, yes, we'll live better than our parents. This is all we want, actually, in all our countries. And I think this is what Georgia has been happening. And I'm very glad to see that. But the thing is, our world is a very small place, and we usually don't go anywhere. You know, there are very few people who have seen the stars from a closer distance. We will all stay where we are, and Georgia will continue to stay as Georgia, Republic of Georgia, as our neighbor, successful place.
Yes, I think that just one sentence, that the best vaccination for Georgia to continue its successful way is to remain and increase its democratic value and to be based on rule of law, and this is the best way. Wherever Georgia is going, it will be the right way as long as it focuses on democratic rule. Yes.
Well, what about
The oil of Georgia is democracy. The main security factor is stability and economic development, and development must be more inclusive. So I do think that Georgia should stay where it is, but is also
ongoing, is also walking towards the direction. Is important not to stay still and indulge in auto complacency because you enjoy, for example, positive rankings. I think you have to, when you say the leadership and the people, pursue the efforts, but of course you need very much to distribute the dividends of these efforts to more people.
I really can't express how I appreciate your time, appreciate your participation. Thank you so much for a very interesting and different answers, and I wish you all success, and thank you again for your work here. And I had many times chance to talk with you, not with you unfortunately, but I had this chance, and you always have this very different and very clear position on Georgian development.
But there is a common thread, and I don't want the concluding word, but there is a common thread among us and other colleagues, that we really are in love with the country, and we really want to see it successful as it deserves.
It's obvious.
And so if we, with frankness, answer in a way to your questions that can sound as critical, is not criticism, is a way of contributing to his ever greater
We
success.
say what we say about our countries to our own political masters.
Absolutely.
So this is
And you
basically
always
saying the
I
same
noticed
thing to
you
your
always
own country.
Talk the truth, you know? Besides the fact that you are, like, you have to be more diplomatic, you always talk the truth, and you are always on point, and you always know what to say, and it's always truth. So thank you.
Can
Thank you again
we
for this.
especially record this part? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you
Cheers,
so
Steve.
much for this really very
Have a
interesting
wonderful
interview.
continued career.
Thank you.
Have a
And I
new
hope
beginning.
that I will have this chance to meet with you again, because
yes, we will.
I'm used to you, you know, because for last
We're not
couple of
going
years.
anywhere
Not
either.
for the headache index though.
Let's go to Khachapur Index.
Headache and we have to figure out a Tahitian wine.
Yes, yes.
Okay, not
So-
Tahitian, sorry, I was not doing it.
And the wine is really tasty. So let's cheers.